Ontario isn't just Canada's political and economic engine. It's where national power, media, and nearly 38% of the country's GDP all converge. Yet, while other provinces fiercely claim their region, most Ontarians simply call themselves Canadian. How did this province become both the centre of gravity and a place that feels unlike everywhere else in Canada? The answer is hiding in plain sight. Toronto and Ottawa sit just hours apart, yet their influence stretches across the country. The nation's biggest newsrooms, the federal government, and corporate headquarters all cluster within the same province. For many Ontarians, the lines between local and national blur. During morning commutes on the GO train, the headlines are national, the politics federal, and the business news global. The result is a sense of belonging that skips over the provincial label. A Bay Street analyst might say I'm Canadian, not out of indifference, but because the province's institutions are wired directly into the country's core. Ontario's reach goes beyond government and business. The largest broadcasters and newspapers shape the conversation from studios and offices in downtown Toronto. Decisions made here ripple outward, setting the tone for what it means to be Canadian. In Quebec, Alberta, or Newfoundland, regional identity is a badge, something to defend or celebrate. In Ontario, the default is simply the nation itself. This overlap between capital and metropolis leaves little space for a separate provincial identity. The province becomes the silent backdrop for national life, its own distinctions fading into the background. For many who live and work here, being Ontarian is almost beside the point. The province is both everywhere and nowhere at once, a paradox born from the concentration of power, media, and ambition within its borders. Ontario accounts for nearly 38% of Canada's entire economy, a figure that puts its economic weight in sharp relief. In 2024, the province's gross domestic product reached $1.2 trillion, almost double that of Quebec, and far surpassing Alberta. This dominance is not built on a single industry, but on a mix that includes finance, technology, advanced manufacturing, and a sprawling service sector. Toronto's financial district alone anchors more than 9% of Ontario's gross domestic product, while auto plants in Windsor and Oshawa keep the province tied to both global supply chains and the fortunes of the US Midwest. The scale of Ontario's economic pull means that other provinces often find themselves selling into its vast market. Prairie grain, Alberta oil, and Atlantic seafood all find their way to Ontario's consumers and companies. When Ontario's growth slows, even by a fraction, the effects ripple outward. In 2025, US tariffs drove a 5.8% drop in Ontario's exports, triggering a 0.6% decline in gross domestic product in a single quarter. Manufacturing output fell nearly 10% over 2 years, and the shock was felt across the country. Prairie suppliers saw orders dry up and Atlantic shippers faced tighter margins. The phrase "when Ontario sneezes, the rest of Canada catches cold" is more than a saying. It is a reflection of how deeply the province's fortunes are woven into the national fabric. This structural leverage shapes not just commerce, but the balance of power and influence in Canadian life. The province's economic gravity is a constant force pulling the rest of the country into its orbit, sometimes willingly, sometimes not. Along the southern spine of Ontario, a nearly unbroken corridor runs from Windsor through Toronto and east to Ottawa. This stretch is shaped by endless highways, sprawling suburbs, and commercial strips lined with big box stores. The 401, one of North America's busiest highways, cuts through the heart of this region, connecting cities with ribbons of pavement and on ramps to every imaginable chain retailer. It is a landscape built for cars, commerce, and speed, more reminiscent of Detroit or Buffalo than Halifax or St. John's. The tempo here is relentless. Mornings begin before sunrise, with streams of commuters heading to offices, factories, and tech campuses. In Toronto's financial core, business meetings spill into coffee shops, and the lunch rush is a blur of suits and smartphones. Career advancement is the common language, and productivity is the measure of worth. The pace stands in sharp contrast to the slower rhythms of the Maritimes, where work and life are less tightly wound. An Atlantic Canadian visiting Toronto might describe the energy as overwhelming, the sprawl as disorienting, and the sense of urgency as foreign. But the corridor's character is not only defined by its infrastructure and hustle. Walk a block in Scarborough or Mississauga and you will hear dozens of languages: Punjabi, Tagalog, Italian, Farsi, Mandarin, and more. Grocery stores stock ingredients from every continent. Festivals fill the calendar with traditions from around the world. Rather than a single regional culture, Southern Ontario is a global mosaic, layered and ever-changing. For many, this blend is both exciting and rootless, a place that feels like everywhere and nowhere at once. North of the crowded highways and city skylines, Ontario stretches into a world that feels like another country. The land opens up to endless forests, lakes, and the Rocky Shield. Northern Ontario covers nearly 90% of the province's territory, but less than 7% of its people live there. In towns like Timmins, Thunder Bay, and Red Lake, daily life revolves around mining, forestry, and the promise of new discoveries in the Ring of Fire mineral belt. The distances are vast. Getting to Toronto can mean a day's drive or a flight that costs more than a week's groceries. For many in the north, Queen's Park, the seat of provincial power in Toronto, feels far away in geography and in priorities. Provincial budgets often focus on highways and transit for the south, while northern roads crumble and broadband gaps widen. Investments in healthcare and education lag behind, and resource revenues rarely seem to return north of the French River. The sense of being governed from a distant capital is a common refrain. One resident from Thunder Bay put it simply, "We send our resources south and get decisions back." Inside Ontario, the split is more than economic. It is a feeling of being left out of the story, of watching southern cities boom while northern communities fight for attention. Even within the province, identity fractures along these lines. There are two Ontarios, each looking at the other across a distance that is more than just miles. Ontario sends more members of parliament to Ottawa than any other province. 121 out of 338 seats, nearly 36% of the entire House of Commons, giving Ontario disproportionate seat power. The next largest, Quebec, holds 78 seats, while Alberta and British Columbia each have fewer than 50. In federal elections, this bloc is more than just a number. A party that sweeps Ontario can form government even if it wins little elsewhere. Campaign strategies, policy platforms, and national debates all bend toward the priorities of Ontario's ridings. In 2021, for example, the path to a majority required a breakthrough in the Toronto suburbs, where dozens of seats can flip on a few thousand votes. The province's population, now over 15 million, ensures that every census triggers boundary changes, often adding even more seats. For the rest of the country, Ontario's weight in Parliament means that federal power is never far from Queen's Park, and national outcomes are often decided before the ballots are even counted west of Thunder Bay. In 2009, as the global recession threatened to shut down Ontario's auto industry, Ottawa and Queen's Park stepped in with a rescue package worth nearly $14 billion. Billions flowed into factories in Windsor and Oshawa, saving thousands of jobs and keeping the heart of Canada's manufacturing belt beating. In Alberta, the mood was very different. Oil prices had crashed, tens of thousands were out of work, but there was no comparable lifeline for the West's energy sector. The bailout became a lightning rod, fueling the sense that the rules were different when Ontario was at risk. One Albertan put it bluntly: "When oil jobs vanish, we're told to tighten our belts. When Ontario's automakers stumble, the checks are in the mail." The numbers told part of the story: $9.8 billion from Ottawa and $4.2 billion from Ontario. But the backlash revealed something deeper, a belief that national policy bends to protect the centre, while the rest are left to weather the storm alone. Ontario's influence shapes national debates, policies, and the very idea of what it means to be Canadian. As the province grows more diverse and powerful, its identity gap only widens. The real question is, can one province stand apart and still hold the centre? Let me know your thoughts below.